Finland, Singapore, China, and Japan. And each of these countries has much to teach the rest of the world about how they organize and deliver primary and secondary schooling. For example, just give you a few. In Finland, those of you who know it, there is impressive focus on play in the early years. There's high quality support for students with special needs. In Japan, those of you who know it, there's a deep belief that everybody is intellectually equal. There is thoughtful use of what is known as lessons study in schools, something I think higher education could often benefit from. In Singapore, there is exemplary teacher training, and the role of the master teachers is distinctive. For those of you, I've not traveled to China, but in China, what I've read, what people talk about, is that the students' work ethic always impresses, and the maths lessons of demonstration, modelling and practice have proven highly successful. And just to take Canada, with which I'm pretty familiar, it's kindergarten quality, it's positive relationships in schools, and approaches to assessment and accountability, which are distinctive. Now, if we try to draw out what we might term principles for high-performing equitable systems, note the adjective equitable, what do we see as the key ingredients of built-to-succeed school systems? And you could, if you've got a higher education hat on, slightly shift the wording, but each will have a resonance. As far as the school systems are concerned around the world, the high-performing equitable education systems get children ready for formal learning. They do it in different ways. They design curricular contexts for mastery. They support children to take on challenges rather than making concessions. There's not a special needs industry. They treat teachers as professionals, and they combine school accountability with school support. Now, when I look at the top school systems, I always ask myself two questions. First, is relative decline inevitable in high-performing school systems? It's a great question in sustainability. Is decline inevitable? Many people in this room will know the work of Jim Collins. In his bestsellers, Built to Last and Good to Great, Collins celebrated the achievements of major US companies in the 80s and the 90s. However, many of you will know this well, into the 21st century, many fell from grace, reputation, and profitability, about which he was subsequently moved to write in How the Mighty Fall. And Collins identified 5 stages of decline, from hubris, born of success, through denial of risk and peril, to irrelevance or death. Now, the 2015 PISA results, which I've mentioned, indicate that these 5 countries, Canada and so on, remain more or less at the top table. But will the trends continue inevitably through the 2020s and 2030s? Is that sustainable for them? Readers familiar with Albert Hirschman's writings, great writer, will recognize this line of questioning that I'm exploring. Hirschman argues that organizations, all organizations, are conceived to be permanently and randomly subject to decline and decay, to a gradual loss of efficiency and energy, no matter how well the institutional framework within which they function is designed. It's a very challenging piece of writing if you run a successful organization. Just look what's happening to the traditional car industry in the States. And the second question I asked myself, so the first question was, is decline inevitable? The second question I ask about these top table countries is, can other countries ever join the top table? Can we in Bahrain, we have got a massive challenge about joining the 500 club, but can we in Bahrain join the top table? Can Morocco join the top table? In the cases, say, of Singapore and Canada, to attribute these countries' enviable outcomes to culture and dismiss their value as models would be a grave mistake. Culture can change, albeit slowly, shui shui. But can we realistically envisage countries such as Mexico, Tunisia, Indonesia, they're all low attainers in that league table, can they ever make that cultural leap to transform systems in order that their students compete with those in Japan, Korea, and New Zealand. And I say to you, colleagues, world's education ministers, to my certain knowledge around the world, are repeatedly asking that question. Can we get anywhere near that top table? Which brings me, in a sense, to the second part of my talk, and it's a particularly focus today on, if you like, on this region of the world. Throughout much of the MENA region, forgive me those of you who are from Wolverhampton, but throughout much of the MENA region, leaders have powerful 2030 and 2040 visions of sustainable societies beyond oil. And education is at the heart of these visions. Read them from this region. And sustainability, as Professor Ghassan said yesterday, set out by the Crown Prince and so on, sustainability is the mantra. So sustainability and education. And I think it's instructive to see which particular aspects of a successful education system people across the world, particularly in this region, are choosing to embrace, to embed sustainable improvements. So, success is a journey. Success is a journey, and each country is at a different stage of planning and delivery. We're not all at the same stage. And I would identify 7 priorities here on the slide, 7 priorities that these countries in the MENA region are variously following through on. And I'm looking at Deanna because she now knows what I'm going to say. How do you know that this slide was prepared by somebody whose first language is Arabic? That's right. When I wrote it the other way around. Diana, my great colleague, who's bilingual as they come, but really interesting. And so much I find in this country where my Arabic is limited, but learning is lost in translation. No lost in translation here, Diana. Okay, what are the 7 key priorities? What are the 7 key priorities that countries across this region are investing in? First of all, they're investing in teachers. There is a unanimous recognition that the most successful global systems, teachers are well trained, respected by parents, and trusted by politicians. But to be a teacher, particularly for men in many parts of this region, is not a natural career path. It's not a natural career path in some cultures. Now, the equivalent of Teach First, Teach for America, Teach for India is being tried, but cultural shifts are not easy. What is being acknowledged across the region is that the remuneration and status of teachers in government schools needs a considerable lift if, as part of diversification of the economies, the brightest and best are to take up the teacher's vocation. Priority 2 is investing in leaders. Well, the same rings true for leadership. Education ministries are realizing that a systematic approach to high-quality leadership training is a sine qua non. Can't do without it. Principals, senior teachers are being given appropriate mentoring and tailored courses with a special emphasis on teaching and learning and moving them away from their traditional role as administrators. You go to a government school in this region, they'll have several health and safety committees. Several. Will they have a teaching and learning committee? Question mark. What I do see very positively is the way links are being made between international and local government schools, and they're paving the way. The third priority is kindergarten, what I call a running start. A running start. Think of Joseph. Think of Joseph in that great primary school that I showed at the beginning. He's having a running start into London South Bank. The reputation of fine early years work in much of Northern Europe has persuaded many governments in the MENA region that investment in kindergarten is vital. Publicly and privately funded systems are emerging, many rooted in the UK's best early years practice, many, of course, borrowing the best from Montessori. How cultures throughout history have educated very young children has varied. And there needs to be a respect clearly for that. But today, most countries hold to this vital formative period for a child being a shared enterprise between the state and the family. Fourthly, the 21st century curriculum. Local, national and international dimensions underpin the best curriculum in any jurisdiction. For countries with textbooks and workbooks which form the core of classroom teaching, change is gradual. Content is being updated to ensure a careful balance between old and new. But one thing I feel strongly about, having worked internationally, and particularly in this part of the world and in India and so on, is that countries across the globe want to modernize without westernizing. Quite right too. Look west, do you necessarily want to copy that? You want to modernize without westernizing. And two aspects of curriculum development which are clearly on the march across the Gulf, which I see every day, is digital empowerment leading to blended learning for students, and secondly, the classroom of tomorrow being bilingual in Arabic and English. And that's a tough call. I might just say in parenthesis that one of the humbling features of working in Bahrain, I mean, great people, they're stunning bilingualism, stunning. The best you'd come across in the world. And what a great talent that is. But that's on the march across this region. International benchmarking, number 5. The impact I've mentioned of TIMSS, PISA, PEARLS, these international exams, in recent years offering respected international comparators is not to be underestimated. And in countries without the traditions of long-established independent national exams, looking outwards for external validation of students' outcomes becomes increasingly important. Where countries feature in international league tables matters to them, and it provides a stimulus for further government investment in schools. My final 2 priorities, one is vocational and technical training. A feature of a number of countries driving for world-class education, notably some of those formerly in the USSR, look at Estonia, much quoted, similar population to Bahrain, has been their well-judged investment in vocational and technical education, closely linked to local labour markets. And we all know, those of us who work here, what the EDB, the Economic Development Board, is doing in driving that. But establishing appropriate qualification frameworks, which BQA are doing here, has been an integral part of the process. The oil-rich nations have observed this and are following suit. Persuading businesses to set aside budgets for traineeships and apprenticeships is imperative, and an arena where government, industry and education must collaborate. And talking to colleagues from London South Bank, you know the way there. Lastly, in terms of priorities, Deanna, you're going to get me challenged on this, but we think, priority 7, there are no MENA universities in the world's top 200. He asserts. We think there may be one. But if I use the Times Higher rankings, there are no MENA universities in the world's top 200. But, my goodness, the ambition is there. The ambition is there. Regional business and HE leaders who themselves have often enjoyed an education in some of the best universities in the US and the UK know with a passion that their own higher education sectors need to step up to the mark. Indeed, as the oil business drives economies in the region to diversify, I believe the oil business must do all it can to press the case for a research and innovation dividend located in public and private universities. And Professor Hamza, speaking last night, is absolutely onto that. And once again, the collaboration imperative is again self-evident. So, to return to where I began almost, this young man, with a cement mixer. The cement mixer can be a metaphor for all kind of learning. But what are we doing through the school systems to make sure this young chap ends up in a great university, has a fulfilling life, and so on? And what are the truths that we keep coming back to? Well, what I've set out today is what I see as the key ingredients of sustainable education and training systems, particularly in relation to schools and colleges. I repeat, success is a journey. Nations and their systems are at different stages of development. Context is everything, but I always urge leaders to look at the best international practice, not to depress them, but by way of a guide star. And I hope what I have said makes you think about where you and your institution and systems are on this journey, and what action, political and education, and what action that leaders in politics and education might need to take to accelerate the journey in ways which are sustainable. 2 slides to end, a coda as we call it in music. Those of you who know about environmental work, and lots of you here steeped in it, you'll be familiar with that, yes? You're familiar with that model of there is a possible future, there is a probable future. We might not want either. We might want a preferable future. We want to shape it. And it's a very powerful image those of you who work with environmentalists will know, activists, very powerful image. And I'll end by saying this is a conference about partnership, embodied, of course, with the two partners. You get nowhere, colleagues, on your own these days. And I just want to leave you with this. Who are your companions? Deanna and I in the office yesterday had a little go at this in Arabic. And so a task ready for homework, and I will give a book prize later, is if anybody can come up with that slide in Arabic so that it works. There's a book on us, book prize on us, Deanna, isn't there? But who are your companions? Who are your allies, your partners in this? Because without it, there's no sustainability route ahead. Shukran jazilan, and may your God go with you.
Roy, thank you very much for your very, very stimulating and highly informative presentation. Can I just ask if there are one or two questions, please, for Roy?
Thank you. Maybe I can start. Thank you for a great presentation. You ended on the note of partnership. One of the challenges in the UK, I believe we have at the moment, is securing partnership between different forms of educational institutions. So certainly at South Bank, we've set up our own academy and technical college to help support learners with transitions across educational boundaries. Yes. Going back to your slide on those 7 points, and bringing in this concept of partnership, I wonder what your thinking is about how you support learners to transition and the degree to which in Bahrain people are looking at education as a holistic environment.
It's a cardinal feature of research terms, all of you will know, that at the point of transition, whether it's age 5 to 6 or 9 to 10 or 14 to 16, there's a dip in achievement. And that's been true for 40, 50 years I've been involved in education. And there have been all kinds of efforts to try and bridge that. Interesting enough, to be specific about Bahrain, we were talking with Richard Roos, Richard not here today from the British Council, about some of the work that needs to be done to bridge the transition between grade 12 and first year university. And of course in this country, because Bahrain starts government schools age 6, we have about 50% of the students at the University of Bahrain doing a foundation course. It's a bridging course. And of course many of your youngsters who are Bahraini youngsters who go to England for university, they do a foundation course. I think the quality of the foundation course is crucial. And the University of Bahrain is leading a transformation plan to improve the quality of its English teaching, the quality of the maths teaching, and the IT teaching. And to that, I'd add what you and I were discussing earlier, the soft skills. To take Bahrain, the Bahrain youngsters have soft skills to die for, fantastic, including the bilingualism. Very well developed in many. And I think the development of those soft skills is really important to make an effective transition between grade 12 and university. In England, I think it's very interesting, you could learn what not to do. I've been involved in so many transition projects that have not achieved. But I think focus, and in the end, of course, I was talking to the RCSI conference last week, and somebody asked me, a doctor asked me something, and I said, in the end, it's about the interpersonal skills of the doctor. And in the end, it's about the interpersonal skills and the intelligence of the tutor, isn't it? To make students feel good about what they're doing. Yes, I can move forward. But I think transition is not an easy one, but there's a lot of work going on, I think, certainly here and in other regions. But if I had to offer one bit of advice to universities, it would be to work well with year 12, grade 12, in the public school system and effect very good transition and then high quality foundation. Bill Clinton used to talk about poverty and social welfare as being, if you're not careful, a safety net, when you wanted it to be a trampoline. Those of you who understand that in other languages, a safety net just takes you down. Trampoline bounces you up. And I think a foundation year that offers a great trampoline is crucial.
Yes, Dr. Roy, I have just one question about investing in teachers. In Bahrain now, there's no school or college of education. And as private universities, we think that we should in Bahrain invest in teachers, prepare the teachers with providing international programs and educational studies to be provided in this country to prepare the teachers and also attract students abroad from different countries to come to study in Bahrain in education, to get a degree, Bachelor of Arts in Education. So none of the universities in Bahrain, including Bahrain University, they have a teaching college, I know, but it's not open for international students, or it's just for Bahrainis as far as I know. So do you think in the future there'll be a possibility to give a chance to private universities to be a lead in this area?
Advisors advise, ministers decide. I couldn't possibly comment on that, but what I would say is that you're absolutely right. The ambition needs to be to build on the successes of the Bahrain Teachers College, which at the moment just trains primary and just trains Bahraini. We need to build on that so that teaching becomes a high status profession, well remunerated, and of course we all know no school system, no university system is better than the quality of its teachers and its faculties. But I'll take that as a strong recommendation from someone who knows. Can I also say, if I may, congratulations on all that you're doing with ASU in your position.
Dr. Roy, please, just one point about the top performing countries. Singapore, Finland, Japan, China. I was just trying, and Canada, I was trying to understand the reason. I'm sure you may have done the analysis. One thing which came to my mind, that these nations realized long time ago that knowledge is the real asset, not just oil and gas and the rest. And they work very, very hard on the educational system. I know about the Singaporean story at least. Did you manage to do some more analysis on the reasons why Finland? Not maybe Iceland, but those nations, to me, they have realized knowledge was the asset for them.
Yes, I mean, I think, it's rather like, when do you get a good deal? If you're striking a deal with somebody, when do you get a good deal? It's when altruism and self-interest collide. Altruism and self-interest need to collide to get a good deal. And I think when you have a coalition of parties which involves, Estonia is a great example, coming out of the strictures of communism, have exploded to number 7, I think, in the PISA tables these days, the TIMSS tables, and they had a united political education, a will to say that's where we're going. And I think that's achievable. It's achievable in this part of the world. Some of these other countries have been around a while. When I entertain people and anyone comes to Oxford, I always take them to Queen's, where I was, and there's a wonderful lawn in Queen's, if you know it, in the courtyard. And you get Americans say, gee, how do you get a lawn like that? Wolverhampton, they say it with a different accent. And I say 400 years. Things take a long time, don't they? Things do take time. I do think culture trumps systems, but I think with the right leadership, then culture can be shaped. But I do hold on to the fact that countries here need to modernize further, but don't westernize. I think shape your destiny as you see fit. Shukran, thank you.
Thank you so much, Roy. Can you please show our appreciation to Roy, please? As we upload the next presentation, can I introduce our next keynote speaker? Can I just say I have a real pleasure to introduce our next keynote speaker. Professor Al-Shawi is a very, very good friend of mine, also a colleague, and I've known Professor Al-Shawi for over 30 years. He also was my teacher when I was just 5 years old.
This is bad news.
And also a colleague at Salford University. Professor Al-Shawi has over 30 years of academic and industrial experience in introducing new technologies and processes to improve the performance of construction organizations. His leading work in integrated project delivery, IPD, and building information modeling has been successfully implemented on large-scale construction projects in UAE. Indeed, he was one of the first people to play around with building information modeling. Previously, Professor Ashawi was the Associate Dean and Director of the Built and Human Environment Research Institute at the University of Salford, the highest-ranked UK institute in the built environment. He was also the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Construction Innovation and the author of over 130 publications. Professor Ashawi has first demonstrated the concept of integrated environment in 1996 in a fully working prototype and worked with major companies to develop its standard. Ashawi, it's a pleasure to introduce you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, John. Let's see if this one works. Can you hear me? Yeah. Right. I don't want to stand there and in the same place. I would like to walk when I talk. First, thank you very much, Charles, for the nice introduction, but I'll tell you, I was his teacher when I was 5 years old. So just in case if you're good in math. This is bad. Every time I go, somebody presents me, says, my teacher, my teacher. Right. Anyhow, really, I would like to take you back. First, I would really like to thank Dr. Wahib and Professor Ghassan, Professor Asib for everything that they've done here and inviting me. It's enjoyable to be in Bahrain. First, I try to take you back to construction industry. That's really where the heavy work is. Now, I just want to ask a question first. How many of you here from construction background? Not bad. How many of you have some sort of BIM knowledge, building information modeling? Okay, that's not bad at all. Good, I'm glad. So in general, for those who they don't know what BIM is, it's basically, think of it as an advanced database. It's a huge database which has everything that a building or an infrastructure project should have, from design to facility management to operation and maintenance. Just a database, right? Which could be, we can present it in 3D as you can see it, but I'm not going to talk about the technology. For those of you who are BIM expert, if you think I'm going to talk about the technology, then you'll be disappointed, I'm afraid. I'll take you just to say, I'll try to make it as general as possible, the introduction, so I'll try to entertain you for the next 30 minutes, otherwise you'll be bored to death. First, let me say that buildings consume, in general, about 40% of the energy that we generate. Electricity, for example, that's huge. Now, waste that comes from construction industry is about 40%. In general, one project, on average, and one project generate 20% waste in any single project. That's average statistics, right? Now, when you talk to consultants, when you talk to contractors, they say, we are the best, we can do it. We've done it before, we've done 10 times, we've done it 100 times. Chris is smiling. But then if that is the case, and I've talked to these guys, I said, if that is the case, then why 80% of our projects run out of time and over budget? It's not my fault, it's that fault, it's his fault, as we had the discussion yesterday. Okay, that's great. Now, we have plenty of infrastructure to do. If we have the infrastructure, they're aging and they need to be maintained. So how are we going to do it again? Are we going to follow the same procedures, the same cycle? We follow the same trap again? What are we going to do? We talked about technology yesterday. It's nice, really. Somebody has